Number 1. Jodi Arias, a woman who went from being seen as a loving girlfriend to becoming the focus of one of the most closely followed trials in recent U.S. history. A relationship marked by passion and conflict ended in a tragedy that still sparks debate. Was it an act of desperation or a planned crime? Jodi Arias was born in 1980 in California. She was known for being charismatic, sociable, and highly ambitious. In 2006, she met Travis Alexander, a young businessman from Arizona who was well-loved in his community, successful, and full of dreams. Their relationship was intense from the beginning, but also complicated. Travis was a religious man seeking stability, while Jodi seemed obsessed with keeping the relationship alive at any cost. Friends and family noticed that what started as a romantic story turned into a bond full of jealousy and arguments. The question remained: was it true love or a relationship destined to end in disaster? In June 2008, Travis Alexander was found dead in his home in Mesa, Arizona. The news shocked the community because Travis was so well-liked. From the start, police suspected Jodi Arias. She had been with him days before, and several pieces of evidence connected her to the crime. At first, Jodi denied any involvement. Later, she claimed 2 intruders were responsible. Finally, she changed her story again, saying she had killed him in self-defense. These contradictions raised even more questions. Why did Jodi keep changing her story? Was she hiding the truth, or was she unable to face it? Evidence began to mount. Travis's camera contained photos taken the same day he died, showing him and Jodi together just hours before. There were also fingerprints and phone records confirming her presence at the scene. The prosecution argued that Jodi, driven by jealousy and resentment, had attacked Travis. The defense claimed she acted to protect herself. The public was divided. Was Jodi a manipulative woman capable of anything, or a victim trapped in a toxic relationship? The trial began in 2013 and quickly became a media spectacle. Millions followed every detail on TV and online. Prosecutors described her as calculating and obsessive, while the defense portrayed her as emotionally pressured. Eventually, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. In 2015, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Travis's family expressed their grief, noting that no sentence could bring him back, but at least justice had been served. Today, Jodi Arias is serving her sentence at the Perryville Correctional Facility in Arizona. She has tried to appeal several times, without success. Her story continues to be analyzed in documentaries, books, and debates, as it shows how a relationship marked by love and obsession can end in tragedy. It also reminds us that jealousy and control are never part of healthy love. Was Jodi Arias's crime the result of a toxic relationship that exploded in a moment of desperation, or was it a calculated act from the start? Number 2. Stacy Caster, a woman who went from being seen as a devoted wife and mother to becoming the center of a case that shocked the entire country. Her story revealed how, behind a calm appearance, a much darker truth could be hiding. The question is inevitable. How could someone who seemed to dedicate her life to her family end up sentenced to spend it in prison? Stacy Caster was born in 1967 in New York. She was described as charismatic, hard-working, and the mother of 2 daughters. For years, those who knew her saw her as a responsible woman devoted to her home. She married Michael Wallace, with whom she had her 2 daughters. The relationship seemed normal, but in 2000, Michael suddenly died. At the time, no one suspected anything unusual, and the case was closed as a natural death. Years later, Stacy started a new life with David Caster, whom she married in 2003. But what seemed like a second chance at happiness ended in tragedy. Was Stacy just unlucky in love, or was there something more behind these deaths? In 2005, David Caster was found dead in his home. The scene raised red flags for investigators because it didn't match the initial explanation. Stacy claimed David had taken his own life, but police began to doubt her. Suspicion grew when Stacy tried to deflect attention. She even manipulated one of her own daughters to make her look guilty. Investigators found a letter on the family computer, seemingly written by the older daughter, confessing to the crimes. However, forensic experts proved Stacy had written it. How could a mother try to blame her own child for something so serious? Authorities decided to reopen the case of Michael Wallace, Stacy's first husband. When the body was exhumed, tests confirmed he hadn't died of natural causes either. With this evidence, investigators realized they were looking at a disturbing pattern. Prosecutors showed how Stacy had built a false image of innocence while hiding the truth. The forged letter, contradictions in her statements, and forensic evidence all helped destroy her defense. Was Stacy after money, power, revenge, or was she just used to manipulating everyone around her? In 2009, Stacy Caster went to trial. The jury heard weeks of testimony and reviewed the evidence. She was ultimately found guilty of murdering her second husband, trying to frame her daughter, and covering up her involvement in her first husband's death. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. To the public, the case became an example of how the truth can come out even when it seems buried under lies. The victims' families spoke in court, expressing the pain and betrayal of discovering that the person they trusted was the one responsible for their loss. Stacy Caster died in 2016 in prison at age 48. She spent her final years in a New York facility. Though she is no longer alive, her story continues to appear in documentaries and true crime shows because it shows how deception can last for years, but eventually the truth comes out. The Stacy Caster case teaches many lessons. It reminds us that appearances can be deceiving, and even those closest to us may be hiding unthinkable secrets. It also shows how justice may be delayed, but it catches up with those who try to manipulate the truth. Was Stacy Caster a calculating mind who planned every step, or a woman who lost her way and got trapped in her own lies? Number 3. Clara Harris. A successful woman, a respected dentist in Texas, whose life seemed like an example of prosperity and family stability. But one betrayal changed everything, and passion turned into an act that would send her to prison. How did a respected professional become entangled in one of the most talked about crimes of passion in the U.S.? Clara Harris was born in 1958 in Colombia and emigrated to the U.S. seeking a better future. She became a dentist, built a successful clinic, and eventually started a family with David Harris, also a dentist. To the community, they were a model couple, two professionals with status, financial stability, and a seemingly perfect life. But behind that image, the marriage began to fall apart. Clara discovered that David was having an affair, something that devastated her. Friends recall that her personality changed drastically. The calm, devoted woman seemed increasingly consumed by anger and pain. How do you deal with such deep betrayal when your entire life was built around that relationship? On July 24, 2002, Clara Harris found her husband with his mistress at a hotel in Houston. The confrontation was immediate and explosive. What could have been a moment of discussion turned into a storm of uncontrollable emotions. Driven by rage and betrayal, Clara lost control, and within minutes went from being a betrayed wife to the one responsible for a life-changing act. The news shocked the country. A respected, successful professional and mother had destroyed everything in a moment of desperation. Was it an uncontrollable emotional outburst or a conscious decision driven by anger? Police arrived quickly. There were witnesses and enough evidence to reconstruct what happened. Reports and testimony indicated Clara acted in a state of emotional breakdown after confronting her husband's infidelity. During questioning, Clara didn't deny what had happened. She admitted she had reacted out of pain and fury. The case quickly drew media attention, not just because of the crime, but because it showed how even educated and successful people can lose control when emotions take over. To what extent is someone responsible for actions taken during an emotional storm? In 2003, Clara Harris went to trial. Prosecutors argued it was an intentional act. The defense claimed it was a crime of passion. The jury found her guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison and given a financial penalty. David Harris's family expressed their sorrow and urged people to remember that despite the betrayal and arguments, a life had been lost unnecessarily. Should justice treat a crime of passion the same as a premeditated one? Clara Harris served her sentence in a Texas prison. After nearly 15 years, she was granted parole in 2018. Since then, she's kept a low profile, far from her former professional success. Clara Harris's case reminds us how dangerous unchecked emotions can be. A life of success and recognition fell apart in minutes, proving that anyone can lose everything when anger and despair take over. Should Clara's case be seen as justice served or a lesson in how uncontrolled emotions can destroy even the life of a successful person? Number 4. Darlie Routier. A Texas mother whose name became linked to one of the most debated court cases in the U.S. during the 1990s. What looked like a violent attack inside her own home turned into a trial that divided the country and placed her on death row. Was Darlie Routier guilty of the crime or the victim of a wrongful conviction? Darlie Lynn Routier was born in 1970 in Pennsylvania. In her youth, she moved to Texas where she met Darren Routier. They got married and built what seemed like the American dream. A nice house in the suburbs, 3 young children, and a comfortable lifestyle thanks to Darren's technology business. But behind that image of success were financial problems and growing tension. The couple had built up debt, and although they tried to keep up appearances, the stress was building. Still, neighbors described Darlie as a loving, attentive mother who was always caring for her children. Was Darlie's life really as perfect as it seemed, or were there signs that something darker could happen? In the early hours of June 6, 1996, Darlie called 911 from her home in Rowlett, Texas, claiming that an intruder had broken in and attacked her 2 sons while she slept in the living room with them. She said she had fought with the attacker and had been injured herself. When police arrived, the scene raised a lot of questions. There were no clear signs of forced entry, and investigators started to doubt her story. The physical evidence in the house didn't match what Darlie said had happened. At first, the community supported Darlie. The image of a young mother asking for justice for her children moved many people. But as the investigation went on, her story began to fall apart. Was it really a stranger who committed the crime, or were the police right to suspect the mother? Investigators concluded that the scene had been staged. They pointed to blood evidence, object placement, and the nature of Darlie's wounds as signs that the story didn't add up. They also questioned her behavior in the days that followed, including a video of her smiling during a birthday memorial for one of her sons. For the prosecution, it showed a lack of emotion. For her defense, it was simply another way to cope with grief. Darlie's lawyers argued that she had been attacked along with her children, and that the real intruder was never caught because police focused only on her from the very beginning. Can we fully trust an investigation when it only considers one theory and ignores other possibilities? In 1997, Darlie went to trial.
The prosecution painted her as a woman overwhelmed by financial and emotional stress, who they said committed the crime because of those pressures. The defense responded with character witnesses and medical evidence suggesting her injuries matched a real attack. After weeks of testimony, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to death. The decision was controversial from the start. Some felt justice had been served, while others saw too many unanswered questions in the investigation. Today, Darlie Routier remains on death row at the women's prison in Gatesville, Texas. She has filed many appeals, claiming mistakes were made in how the evidence was handled and interpreted. Several human rights organizations have said her case deserves a closer look. The story of Darlie Routier remains a mystery. To some, she is a guilty mother who tried to hide what she did. To others, she is an innocent woman caught in a rushed investigation and a trial shaped by public pressure. Does the Darlie Routier case represent true justice, or a mistake that could cost the life of a woman who still claims she's innocent?
Number 5. Brenda Andrew. Brenda Andrew seemed like the typical wife and mother, but she ended up at the center of a case that shocked the entire United States. Her story revealed how ambition and deception can destroy everything. What led Brenda to turn her marriage into a plan that ended in a life sentence? Brenda Andrew was born in Oklahoma and raised in a religious and conservative environment. People who knew her described her as polite, charming, and active in her church. She married Rob Andrew and they had 2 children. To the community, they seemed like a happy and stable family. However, the marriage was facing problems. Brenda was secretly in a relationship with another man while trying to benefit from a life insurance policy Rob had in his name. Was Brenda a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage, or someone who had already started planning every step to gain from the situation? On November 20, 2001, Rob Andrew was attacked in the garage of his home in Oklahoma City. Brenda said it had been an ambush and claimed she was a victim who had managed to survive. But investigators started to notice problems with her story. There were no signs of a random attack. It looked like someone close to him had planned everything. Authorities soon discovered that Brenda wasn't acting alone. Her lover, James Pavitt, a former insurance agent, had directly taken part in the plan. Was Brenda the one behind everything, using her partner as an accomplice, or did both share the same level of responsibility? The police found clear evidence, messages between Brenda and James showing they had planned the crime in advance. It also came out that Brenda tried to collect Rob's life insurance just days after his death. When charges were filed against her, Brenda fled the country with her accomplice, leaving her children behind. That decision destroyed her public image. The example of a caring mother was now a fugitive. They were caught months later in Mexico and brought back to the United States to face justice. Why would someone who claimed to love their family abandon everything for such a harmful plan? In 2004, the trial against Brenda Andrew began. The jury heard strong evidence about her role in the crime and how she had tried to manipulate the situation for financial gain. The verdict was clear. Brenda Andrew was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in Oklahoma. James Pavitt, her accomplice, received the same sentence. The case caused outrage in the community. Rob Andrew's family said they hadn't only lost a loved one, but that Brenda's actions had deeply affected their children forever. Today, Brenda Andrew remains on death row at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in Oklahoma. Her story often appears in documentaries and true crime programs because it shows how ambition can lead someone to harm the very people who trusted them the most. The Brenda Andrew case is a lesson about how appearances can be deceiving.
a woman who seemed to live by religious principles ended up being willing to do anything for money and to maintain a secret relationship. Was Brenda Andrew a woman blinded by ambition who made a terrible decision, or a calculating person who always had her plan in mind?
Number 6. Betty Broderick. For years, Betty Broderick was seen as the perfect wife and devoted mother who stood by her husband as he built a successful professional career. But what seemed like a perfect marriage ended up as one of the most famous cases of emotional breakdown and revenge in the United States. A story of love, betrayal, and retaliation that still sparks debate today. Was Betty a woman pushed to the edge after years of suffering, or someone who chose the darkest path to deal with her pain? Betty Broderick was born in 1947 in New York into a traditional Catholic family. From an early age, she was raised with a very clear idea: to get married, start a family, and support her husband in everything. In 1969, she married Daniel Broderick, an ambitious young man who would become a medical malpractice lawyer and later a prominent figure in California. For years, Betty played the role of the devoted wife. She raised 4 children, managed the household, and supported Dan while he studied and worked hard to achieve success. As he rose professionally, she stayed in the background, trusting that all their sacrifices would pay off and that they would one day enjoy the life they had built together. But the marriage began to fall apart in the 1980s when Betty suspected that Dan was having an affair with his legal assistant, Linda Colcana. Although Dan denied it at first, the truth eventually came out. For Betty, that betrayal was devastating. Not only was she losing her husband, but she was watching the life she had built over 2 decades crumble. How does someone react after dedicating their whole life to a family, only to realize everything could be replaced in just a few months? The separation between Betty and Dan became one of the most public divorces of the time. Legal battles over child custody and property turned into an endless war. Betty felt that Dan, with his financial power and legal connections, had every advantage. Over time, her behavior became more erratic. She left angry voicemail messages, broke into the family home, and showed obsessive behavior toward Dan's new partner. The media began to portray her as out of control, but those close to her said she was emotionally destroyed after years of emotional wear and the feeling of being unfairly replaced. On April 5, 1989, Dan married Linda, confirming Betty's deepest fears. That event was, for her, final proof that she had lost everything: the man she had supported, the family stability, and the life she had dreamed of since she was young. Was Betty a woman who simply couldn't accept the end of her marriage, or someone who truly felt cornered by a system that left her powerless? On November 5, 1989, Betty made a decision that would change her life forever. She entered Dan and Linda's house in San Diego and attacked them while they were asleep. The act was sudden. There was no chance for discussion or resolution. Both lost their lives that morning. The news spread across the country. The image of a devoted wife, now responsible for a double tragedy, shocked the public and started a national debate. Was this a cold act or the result of years of emotional and psychological pain? Police arrested her quickly. Betty didn't run or try to hide what she had done. Her arrest was as shocking as the act itself because it confirmed that this mother of 4 had crossed a line she could never return from. During the investigation, prosecutors described Betty as a controlling and obsessive person, unable to accept the divorce. Her defense team, however, argued that she had suffered for years, was devastated by betrayal, and had been treated unfairly in the legal system. Should the legal system consider emotional trauma when judging a crime like this? Betty Broderick's trial in 1991 was followed by millions. Testimonies from children, friends, and lawyers showed 2 completely different sides. One of a woman who couldn't let go of her marriage, and another of someone deeply hurt by an unfair and painful process. In the end, the jury found her guilty of second-degree murder.
She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 32 years. The decision divided public opinion. Some believed the punishment was fair and necessary, while others saw Betty as a symbol of what can happen when someone feels abandoned and betrayed in an unequal marriage. Betty Broderick is currently serving her sentence in a California prison. She requested parole in 2010 and again in 2017, but both were denied. Her children remain divided. Some support her release, while others believe she still poses a risk. Now in her 70s, her case is still a reference in documentaries, TV series, and legal debates. It raises questions about love, betrayal, justice, and emotional limits. Betty Broderick was a woman overwhelmed by circumstances or someone who knowingly chose violence to solve her problems.
Number 7. Sharon Kinne. Her name became a symbol of mystery and controversy in the 1960s. Sharon Kinne was a woman who seemed to live a normal life but ended up connected to several suspicious deaths and an international trial. Her story is so mysterious that even today, no one knows for sure what her final fate was. Was Sharon a wife who experienced a series of tragic events, or a calculating person capable of removing anyone in her way? Sharon Kinne was born in 1939 in Kansas, United States. From a young age, she was described as attractive, confident, and strong-willed. As a teenager, she met James Kinne, a young Mormon missionary, and they married when she was just 16. Despite her age, Sharon quickly became a wife and mother. To those around them, the Kinnes seemed like a typical 1950s couple. He worked and studied to build a better future, while she stayed home to care for their children. But behind that image of normal family life, there were tensions. James was often away from home, and Sharon, in her early 20s, already felt trapped in a routine she wanted to escape. So the question arises, was Sharon just a young woman unhappy in her marriage, or someone already looking for darker ways to get what she wanted? In March 1960, James Kinne was found dead from a gunshot wound in their home. Sharon claimed it was an accident caused by their 2-year-old daughter, who she said had been playing with the gun. Many people found this explanation hard to believe, but the police didn't have enough evidence, so the case was closed as an accidental death. Still, rumors started to spread. Friends and family noted that Sharon didn't seem very upset about losing her husband. It was even discovered that she had been involved with other men during the marriage. So, was this really a tragic accident or a carefully planned act? Just a few months later, Sharon was back in the news. This time, the victim was Patricia Jones, the wife of a man Sharon had been seeing romantically. Patricia disappeared and was found dead days later. Investigators confirmed that Sharon had been the last person to see her alive. During questioning, Sharon changed her version of events several times, which only increased suspicion. She was taken to trial, but again, there wasn't enough solid evidence to convict her. Once again, she walked free, and people began to see her as someone who knew exactly how to escape justice. Was she just incredibly lucky, or did she know how to manipulate every situation in her favor? Years later, Sharon traveled to Mexico with another romantic partner. There, in 1964, she was involved in another tragic incident, the death of a Mexican man in a hotel in Mexico City. According to local authorities, Sharon shot the man during an argument. She said it was self-defense, but prosecutors in Mexico claimed it was intentional. This time, she was convicted and sent to prison in Mexico, which surprised many in the U.S. The woman who had escaped justice back home was finally behind bars abroad. But the story took another unexpected turn. In 1969, Sharon Kinne escaped from the Mexican prison where she was serving her sentence. No one knows exactly how she did it or who might have helped her. What's certain is that she disappeared without a trace. She has never been officially seen again. The Mexican government issued arrest warrants, and the U.S. kept the case open, but Sharon seemed to vanish. Some believe she fled to another country. Others think she changed her identity and lived in hiding. And some say she may have died without anyone knowing. How did a woman under such close watch manage to disappear completely? Sharon Kinne's whereabouts remain unknown. Officially, she is still a fugitive from the Mexican justice system. If she were alive today, she would be over 80 years old. Her story has inspired documentaries, books, and crime shows because it includes all the elements of an unsolved mystery: suspicious deaths, manipulation, high-profile trials, and a shocking escape. Sharon Kinne's case is one of a kind in U.S. criminal history. She was accused of killing her husband, suspected in the death of her lover's wife, convicted in Mexico for another crime, and still managed to escape without a trace. Her life leaves us with a lasting question. Was she truly guilty of all those crimes, or just someone caught up in a series of bad situations and rumors? Was Sharon Kinne a calculating person who always knew how to avoid consequences, or someone trapped in a chain of tragedies and suspicion?
Number 8. Tracy Richter. A mother and wife who for years was seen as strong and protective, but whose name became linked to a crime full of contradictions. What started as a story of self-defense turned into a case full of secrets, lies, and a truth very different from the one she first told. Was Tracy a victim fighting for her life, or a manipulator who invented a story to cover up a planned act? Tracy Ann Richter was born in 1966 in Chicago. She was described as smart, outgoing, and strong-willed. In the 1990s, she moved to Iowa with her second husband, Michael Roberts, hoping to build a peaceful life in a small town. To many people, she was a dedicated mother who wanted the best for her children. But her life had never been calm. Tracy had gone through a troubled first marriage and was in constant legal battles with her ex-husband, John Pittman, over custody of their son. That stressful situation would later play a key role in what happened in 2001. Was Tracy just trying to protect her family, or already showing signs of control and manipulation? On December 20, 2001, in the quiet town of Early, Iowa, Tracy called the police to report a shooting in her home. When officers arrived, they found 20-year-old Dustin Wedd dead. Tracy said she had acted in self-defense, that Dustin had broken into her home to harm her, and that she had no choice but to protect herself and her kids. At first, police believed her. After all, she was a mother who claimed to have defended her family. The community supported her, and for a while, she was seen as brave for surviving an attack. But soon, doubts started to appear. Her story had inconsistencies, and some things at the scene seemed too convenient. One of the key details was a note that supposedly linked her ex-husband to a plot against her. Investigators suspected it may have been planted. Had Tracy really been attacked, or did she create the whole scene to get rid of someone and blame her ex? For almost a decade, the case remained unclear. In 2001, it was closed as self-defense, but the rumors never stopped. Neighbors, friends, and even family members began to describe Tracy as controlling and obsessed with staying in control of everything. Years later, police reopened the case. They re-examined the evidence and spoke to people close to Tracy. What they found changed everything. There were signs that Dustin hadn't been a dangerous intruder, but a young man who knew Tracy and may have been tricked into entering the home that day. The most shocking discovery was that the note found near Dustin, which supposedly connected him to a plan, may have been written by Tracy herself. That changed the whole case. Her version of self-defense began to fall apart. How far can someone go to win a personal battle? In 2011, nearly 10 years after the incident, Tracy Richter was arrested and taken to trial. Prosecutors presented a very different story than the one she had told. They said she had planned everything to get revenge on her ex-husband and used Dustin as part of a made-up story. The trial got major media attention. The defense said Tracy was just a protective mother who acted in fear, but the prosecution portrayed her as cold and calculating. In the end, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dustin Wedd's family expressed their heartbreak over losing a young man whose life had just begun, and their frustration that his death had been surrounded by lies for so many years. Her story continues to appear in documentaries and true crime shows because it raises a powerful question. Can someone build a lie so convincing that it fools the system for years? Tracy Richter's case is a reminder that first impressions aren't always the full truth. For years, she was seen as a survivor, until new evidence revealed something very different. Her case raises serious issues about manipulation, justice, and what happens when personal conflicts turn into something much worse. Was Tracy Richter truly defending herself, or did she use that story as a cover for something she had carefully planned?
Number 9. Marissa DeVault. A mother from Arizona who said she was the victim of abuse in her marriage, but whose case revealed a much more complicated truth. Her story shows how the line between victim and wrongdoer can sometimes become blurry, and how a story of self-defense can turn into one of the most debated trials of the decade. Was Marissa a woman who acted in desperation to protect herself, or someone who tried to cover up a carefully planned act? Marissa DeVault was born in 1978 and lived in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. She was married to Dale Harrell, and they had 3 daughters together. To the community, they seemed like a normal family, living in a quiet neighborhood with a stable life and a secure future. However, Marissa claimed her marriage was far from perfect. In later interviews, she said she had suffered years of physical and emotional abuse, but had never reported it officially. Everything changed in January 2009. One night, Dale Harrell was seriously injured in their home. Marissa called 911 and said she had acted in self-defense during a violent episode. At first, it looked like a clear case of a woman defending herself, but soon, investigators found contradictions. Was Marissa telling the truth about her marriage, or using that story to justify something else? Marissa claimed her husband attacked her that night, and that she had no choice but to defend herself. But investigators found key problems with her version. They also learned that Marissa was having a relationship with another man, and had serious financial problems. This led authorities to consider another theory, that the act wasn't spontaneous, but something motivated by money and emotional interests. It was also revealed that Marissa had tried to benefit from her husband's life insurance, which raised even more doubts. At first, the community saw her as a woman who had endured a hard relationship. But as new facts came out, people started to question her story. Was this really about survival, or was she using a victim story to hide her real motives? Investigators dug deeper. They discovered she had been in regular contact with her lover, and that she had considered Dale an obstacle to the life she wanted. They also found digital records and witness statements suggesting she wasn't in immediate danger that night, weakening her claim of self-defense. During questioning, Marissa changed her story more than once. First, she said it was self-defense, then called it an accident, and later focused only on the alleged abuse. These changes helped prosecutors argue that she was trying to control the narrative to avoid punishment. Were those changes caused by trauma, or just attempts to escape responsibility? Marissa's trial began in 2014 and got major media attention. Prosecutors said it was a planned act, driven by money and her desire to start a new life. They showed evidence of her debts, private messages, and her effort to collect life insurance. Her defense insisted she was a victim of abuse who acted in desperation.
They brought up emotional testimony and her mental state. The jury listened to both sides, but in the end, they believed the prosecution. Marissa was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Dale Harrell's family shared their pain in court, saying the true tragedy was that 3 daughters would now grow up without their father and with their mother in prison. Today, Marissa is serving her sentence in Arizona. She still claims to have been a victim, but her appeals have been denied. Her case is often featured in crime documentaries because it raises a tough question. How do we know when someone is truly defending themselves or just trying to cover up something darker? Marissa DeVault's case teaches us many lessons. It reminds us that behind every crime, there are layers of relationships, secrets, and contradictions. It also shows the importance of taking abuse claims seriously, while also being careful when such claims are used without clear evidence. Was Marissa DeVault a woman stuck in a toxic marriage who acted in a moment of fear, or someone who planned it all to get rid of her husband and gain from it?
If these cases shocked you, and you want to learn more real stories about crimes and characters like these, subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.